reiterated our request and our intention to actually move for this motion because, Mr. President, under the Constitution, the CA shall be constituted within 30 days after the Senate and the HOR shall have been organized with the election of the Senate President and the Speaker of the House. The Senate was organized, Mr. President, July 28. Therefore, Mr. President, the Commission on Appointments must be constituted not later than August 27. And that's next week, Mr. President, and we still have to issue notices, etc. Now, Mr. President, on the statements, and I sincerely respect our former Senate President, Mig Subiri. Mr. President, let me just point out, Mr. President, no one's robbing of anything because we're doing this on the basis of the Supreme Court decisions, Mr. President. Mr. President, and if I may again, Mr. President, it is submitted, if the tradition, Mr. President, the concern here now, Mr. President, is can tradition on informal agreements between senators be cited in determining how many members from the majority and the minority blocks will be represented in the CA? Mr. President, again, this representation submits that we stick to the established mathematical formula and the use of Supreme Court decisions as guidance, Mr. President. Kaya po nagbigay sila ng desisyon so that we can be guided accordingly in determining the proportional representation in the CA. In the SC resolution, again, Mr. President, on Gingona versus Gonzales, the court said, no practice or tradition established by a mere tolerance can, without judicial acquiescence, ripen into a doctrine of practical construction of the fundamental law. In the same decision, Mr. President, in the Gingona resolution, it also states, who decides the question of proportionality, Mr. President? Who decides? The power to choose who among them will sit as members of the Commission on Appointments belong to the Senate, Mr. President. And that's why, Mr. President, even this representation who made that motion will submit to the decision of every member of the Senate. And furthermore, Mr. President, in the Ika-10 versus Mitra, the Supreme Court again pointed out the other political parties or groups, and I quote, other political parties or groups in the House, such as petitioners, kaiba, which is presumably the member also with the coalition majority. Ang sabi po ng Supreme Court, are bound by the majority's choices. Mr. President, last but not the least, as much as we wanted to entertain the idea of coin tossing, Mr. President. My sister won in the mayoralty election in Bukawi by coin toss, Mr. President. But we have no precedence on this matter, Mr. President. And again, let me submit for the record that the Supreme Court provided us guidelines with all due respect to our colleagues, especially in the minority. Thank you, Mr. President.
The minority leaders.
Yes,
Nice.
thank you, Mr. President. The Gingona versus Gonzales issue should be the prevailing, not the Mitra or Ika-10 versus Mitra, as mentioned earlier by the majority leader. The interpretation of Constitution Article 6, Section 1, Section 18 is very clear. Basis of proportional representation from political parties and party organizations. Ang linaw nun eh. Walang sinasabi itong majority and minority.
Mr. President, if I may, I believe
The majority leader
the
is
party organization is the minority and the majority. And I submit again, Mr. President, hindi po ako magmamagaling-galingan or magsasabing eksperto dito, but nais ko, Mr. President, na isubmit itong aking posisyon sa body, Mr. President, at maging sa mga kasama natin dito sa bulwagan ito, Mr. President.
Mr. President, di ko pwedeng sabihin yung laman ng Constitution ng parties, organizations, meaning majority and minority. That is a very poor interpretation, Mr. President. Ang linaw eh. The basis of proportional representation from the political parties and parties or organizations registered under the party list system represented therein. Hindi ko makikita yung majority-minority doon, Mr. President. So I think kung sa mga simple membership ng mga committee, nagkukonsulta kinukonsulta members ng minority, kinukonsulta bawat members sila. Bakit hindi sa napaka-importanting body like the Commission on Appointments? Ba't hindi makakonsulta? The President pro tem was talking to us about it just a few minutes ago. That's the point, Mr. President. Bakit ganito? But then again, that is my appeal. And if it doesn't work, then let's work.
Mr. President, I submit, Mr. President, I think we have been debating on this, Mr. President. Again, that is the position of this representation, and we submit it, Mr. President.
Before acting on the motion of the majority leader duly objected to by the distinguished minority floor leader, Chair would like to state for the record that neither the majority nor the minority has a monopoly of interpreting what the Supreme Court said in regard to the Supreme Court decision on the composition of the Commission on Appointments. In fact, that is the reason why in no less than 8 occasions, cases were brought before the Supreme Court precisely on the composition of the Commission on Appointments, beginning as early as 1951, the latest being in 2009. And the Senate is a deliberative body. The Supreme Court said it is the Senate that decides on these matters. Chair takes exception to the statement that this is being rammed because we debated on it, and when there is a motion duly objected to, our rules state very clearly that we should divide the House by acting on that clear difference in opinion with respect to matters that the Senate needs to act upon, specifically that we should constitute and organize the Commission on Appointments within 30 days after the organization of both the House and the Senate. That date lapsing on August 27, 2025. What is the pleasure of Senator Cayetano?
Mr. President, aside from, with the permission of both the majority leader, minority leader, you know, of course, as a former diplomat, I'd rather na mag-usap, and I think nag-uusap ng the last 2 weeks. Unfortunately, I think hindi umuusad yung point na mag-agree. But I was once in the position of the minority leader, and he was the majority leader. So I do understand the duty of Senator Soto not only to stand up here, but to make sure that in the CA, there is more representation for the minority. However, this is also unique because both the Senate President and the minority leader are from the NPC, which is not the first time because this happened during the time of the LDP, precisely because we're one of the 3 countries in the world, or 4, that presidential pero multi-party. Usually kasi pag presidential, 2 parties lang. So medyo malinaw yung representation. Having said that, my appeal lang is that kung hindi nga mapag-uusapan, aside from the 30-day, the 2 pending, aside from the diplomats and the military officers, it is the Secretary of Energy and Secretary of DNR. We all know that it's not only DPWH and flood control projects ang nag-cause ng baha. We also know that whether it's reclamations or kulang ng ECC, whether it's mga ilog na tinambakan, DNR yan eh. And we also know that ang laki ng problema sa kuryente in some parts of the Philippines. So I mean, further delay might benefit us sa pag-uusap, but it will damage, you know, the discussions of this with the secretaries, because the CA is such a powerful tool to get the secretaries on the right track. At kung hindi, dapat sila i-confirm, hindi i-confirm. Kung i-confirm, through our collective efforts, I think itong flooding at saka itong kuryente madidiscuss na maaga. So I just like to empathize with both the majority and minority leader, but emphasize that we have to decide sooner than later. Thank you, Mr. President.
Noted and entered into the records. What is the pleasure of the Honorable Zubiri?
Maybe there's still we can ask for a minute suspension. Maybe there's some diplomacy left in this situation. Since the former Secretary of Foreign Affairs stood up and said that he could help in the diplomacy or this issue particularly.
Instead of suspending so as to make the most out of the time of the Senate, can we defer acting on the motion of the majority leader duly objected to and take up some of the reference of business
That's okay.
while waiting, and thereafter we shall proceed to act on the motion of the majority floor leader. With the permission of Senator Zubiri and the minority.
Okay.
Chair hereby defers acting on the motion duly objected to by the minority leader to elect the 10 members of the Commission on Appointments. Majority leader?
Mr. President, move that we proceed with the additional reference of business.
Any objection? Hearing none, motion is approved. Secretary is directed to comply.
Additional reference of business bills on first reading, Senate number 551. An act providing for the issuance of a list of low-lying areas of the Philippine territory vulnerable to rising sea levels as a result of climate change and areas at high risk for natural disasters, mandating the DNR, DOST, Climate Change Commission, and other concerned government agencies for its regular updating, appropriating funds therefore, and for other purposes, Senator Villaneuva.
To the Committees on Environment, Natural Resources and Climate Change, Science and Technology, and Finance.
552, providing for the strategic exploration, development, utilization, and conservation of mineral resources for the benefit of local industries and communities and for other purposes, Senator Villaneuva.
To the Committees on Environment, Natural Resources, and Climate Change and Ways and Means.
553, an act defining and penalizing espionage and other offenses against national security, Senator Villaneuva.
To the Committee on National Defense and Security, Peace, Unification, and Reconciliation.
554, an act integrating voter education in the junior and senior high school curricula, Senator Villaneuva.
To the Committees on Basic Education and Electoral Reforms and People's Participation.
555, integrating labor education in the senior high school curriculum, Senator Villanueva.
To the Committees on Basic Education and Labor Employment and Human Resources Development.
556, an act prohibiting the selling and or buying of admission tickets through unauthorized sales channels, providing penalties and for other purposes, Senator Villanueva.
To the Committees on Justice and Human Rights and Trade, Commerce, and Entrepreneurship.
557, prohibiting the extraordinary rendition of persons to foreign jurisdictions, Senator Marcos.
To the Committees on Justice and Human Rights and Foreign Relations.
558, recognizing the rights of natural ecosystems, populations, and processes, and providing mechanisms for the protection and enforcement thereof, Senator Ontiveros.
To the Committees on Environment and Natural Resources and Climate Change, Justice, Human Rights, and Finance.
559, preventing, mitigating, and responding to risks affecting children while on vacation, engaging in leisure, or participating in any other activities related to the tourism industry.
To the
Senator
Committees on Women, Children, Family Relations, Gender Equality, and Tourism.
560, an act establishing the National Coastal Greenbelt Program, providing funds and for other purposes, Senator Ontiveros.
To the Committees on Environment, Natural Resources, Climate Change, and Finance.
561, an act providing for the Magna Carta for Children, Senator Ontiveros.
To the Committees on Women, Children, Family Relations, and Gender Equality, and Finance.
560, an act to ensure gender-responsive and inclusive protocols and programming to address the gender-differentiated needs of women during emergencies, including public health concerns, pandemics, and natural and man-made disasters, Senator Ontiveros.
To the Committees on Women, Children, Family Relations, and Gender Equality, Health and Demography, and Finance.
563, an act providing for a comprehensive and responsive civil registration of vital statistics system, providing funds and for other purposes, Senator Ontiveros.
To the Committees on Justice and Human Rights and Finance.
564, an act strengthening the regulatory system in the country to prevent counterfeit pharmaceutical products, declaring large-scale counterfeiting activities as an offense involving economic sabotage, providing for the prohibition and penalties for violations thereof, and repealing for the purpose RA 8203, the special law on counterfeit drugs, Senator Ontiveros.
To the Committees on Health and Demography, Justice and Human Rights, and Finance.
565, amending Republic Act number 11313, the Safe Spaces Act, and for other purposes, Senator Ontiveros.
To the Committees on Women, Children, Family Relations, and Gender Equality, and Justice and Human Rights.
566, an act providing for a Magna Carta for workers, enterprises, and organizations in the informal economy, and institutionalizing mechanisms for recognition, the integration, and transition to the formal economy for implementation thereof, and for other purposes, Senator Ontiveros.
To the Committees on Labor, Employment, and Human Resources Development, Social Justice, Welfare and Rural Development, and Finance.
567, an act protecting the rights of internally displaced persons and penalizing the acts of arbitrary internal displacement, Senator Ontiveros.
To the Committees on Justice and Human Rights, Social Justice, Welfare and Rural Development, Ways and Means, and Finance.
568, ordaining the promotion of social enterprises to alleviate poverty, establishing for the purpose the poverty reduction through social entrepreneurship program, and providing support, benefits, and appropriating funds therefore, Senator Ontiveros.
To the Committees on Trade, Commerce, and Entrepreneurship, Social Justice, Welfare and Rural Development, Ways and Means, and Finance.
569, instituting a national land use and management policy, providing for the implementing operating mechanisms therefore and for other purposes, Senator Ontiveros.
To the Committees on Sustainable Development Goals, Innovation and Futures Thinking, and Finance.
570, creating the National Transitional Justice Reconciliation and Commission for the Bangsamoro, establishing a Transitional Justice and Reconciliation Program for the Bangsamoro, appropriating funds therefore, Senator
To
Ontiveros.
the Committees on Local Government, National Defense and Security, Peace, Unification and Reconciliation, and Finance.
571, an act strengthening water service cooperatives, establishing for this purpose the Local Water Service Cooperatives Development Fund and providing support programs for their growth and development, Senator Ontiveros.
To the Committees on Cooperatives, Public Services,